Hello, and welcome back to the Mountain Talk podcast. My name is Jeff. I will be your host once again for this podcast adventure. Today we'll be discussing the Beginner's Guide to 14ers, and I'm joined by two special guests today, Matthew Woodworth and Laura Ervin. And this is our first time having guests on this podcast. We're super excited about that. And how about I start with Matt here? Let's see, about 30 to 60 seconds on who you are.
Absolutely. So I'm Matt Woodworth. I am a sophomore student at CSU up in Fort Collins. I love to climb 14ers, done about 19 by now. I love photography and I love to play music. So I'm happy to kind of talk about 14ers today with y'all.
Awesome. And Laura, so 36 seconds. Who are you?
I'm Laura. I just moved here about 6 months ago, so relatively new at 14ers. I've only been on two. Moved here because I wanted to hike more, and where I'm from, there's not a lot of mountains. I'm a graphic designer. I work for a company outside of Omaha still, and I like to do art.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And for those listening that don't know, we are currently in Denver, Colorado. We are broadcasting live from Golden right now. Just for those tuning in that don't know, we're a Denver-based podcast. A lot of transplants move here, and hence Mountain Kids and Mountain Talk starting. So let's go ahead and jump into 14ers. First, Laura, how many have you done?
2.
You've done 2, okay. 2. And Matt, how many have you done?
19, almost 20.
19, almost 20. Okay, Jeff, how many have you done? Oh, I've done 0. So I'm the never started, Laura's the beginner perspective, and Matt is the expert. So let's go ahead, and a lot of people want to know, how do you get started doing 14ers? What are the best beginner mountains, beginner gear, and just the overall, how do you start?
Well, I mean, it's a big question for sure in this sport. I started about a year and a half ago when I moved up here from Houston, so I didn't have much experience at all. And I don't know, my dad had told me about 14ers because he grew up here, and I thought I might as well try one. So my first 2 were Grays and Torreys, about an hour and a half from the Denver area.
How long ago was that?
Rough road. Sorry?
How long ago was that, your first
That
time?
was not last summer, but the summer before that. And it was in July.
Okay. And what do you think was the biggest takeaway from your first time?
Biggest takeaway? 14ers are no joke. There's a lot that goes into them, a lot to think about. But they're one of the most rewarding and humbling things I've done. So definitely worth it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Laura, how long ago was your first time?
Well, that was this summer, so 6 months ago was Beardstadt. I had a group of friends who were already going to go hike it, so I kind of just jumped on with their group, and I had never done anything that challenging before, and I hadn't really hiked much either in Colorado because I just moved there, so it was, yeah, you're right, they're not a joke. It's completely different than just hiking normally. You're taking on a huge elevation gain and really pushing your body, but it is so rewarding. It was really
What was the biggest challenge then?
Oh, just the elevation gain. I think being up that high, it's like a mind game. At a certain point, you get to a certain height, and then all of a sudden your brain is just on autopilot. And I feel my friend, she was telling me how when you're hiking up that high, she would get in this super weird silly mood where her brain was not getting enough oxygen, so she would just laugh at everything. Yeah, it's really interesting. People react so differently when they're up that high, and it's you don't know what you're gonna get. Yeah, you could either have a really good experience or
That's why it can be dangerous taking beginners that don't know what they're getting into, don't pack the right gear, don't pack enough water, food.
Yeah.
Definitely, and I can actually speak to that. My roommate, I wanted to take him on a 14er, and kind of funny, he likes to call himself a tree, because once we get above tree line, it kind of starts going down from there, starts feeling sick, getting pale. So definitely, I think the biggest thing to do is to kind of be at elevation to train for it. So hike a lot, get the I don't know, get your calories burning, get that VO2 going on multiple hikes, and then you can train for it later on, and then attempt a 14er.
Yeah,
that's the end goal.
I agree with that. I mean, I haven't hiked a 14er, but I've hiked tons of different trails, 13ers and everything in between, just not 14ers. It doesn't have the prestige, but I would definitely recommend if you're not in the state of Colorado and you're just flying in, you definitely want to acclimate a couple days and not just go do a 14er, because I know people that have tried and they're like, it was the worst experience of my life. Yeah. So you definitely want to be acclimated. I'd stay in Denver, even if you're just hiking 13ers, and just hikes in general or anything up in the Rockies is going to be difficult on the lungs and the altitude. So definitely want to do some training before any hike, I would recommend. As far as going up the mountain, I've heard that you want to go slow but keep moving. Like, if you take a break you don't want to take a break for is that true? You don't want to take a break for 5 minutes? You want it to at least be 15? Or what's the rule on that?
I don't know. Rule of thumb for me is it's a slow trudge. Just keep going. Finding Nemo, Dory always says, just keep swimming. My favorite quote ever. Just keep hiking. Come on. So essentially, you'll be hiking, start at the bottom. It might be tough, but I think the biggest takeaway is to continue hiking no matter what. And if you are going to take a break, if you really need to, get your breath back. I think that's the most important part. So take a longer break if you really need to, but unless you really need to, I would say your end goal is to get to the top and get back safely. So I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I know from my experience, getting up to a certain point, the first couple miles, you're just okay, this is fine, this isn't bad. And then it's once you hit a certain point, I've had to stop for 5 minutes and just sit there, and then go back and hike a couple more feet, honestly, and then have to stop and then keep going. And it's just this, it's definitely a slow trudge for sure. But yeah, I mean, you do it at your pace. There's no it's not a race. It isn't.
It is not a race.
No, and it's
you will get there when you get there. And that's all that matters.
Okay. And another aspect of 14ers, obviously it's safer to do anything in a group outside, but solo adventures. A lot of people are wondering, what's the safest way to do them solo? Laura, wasn't your second 14er you hiked a solo one?
It sure was.
Yeah? How was that? What was that experience?
Well, I honestly, it was a choice. I stayed up the night before until 3 a.m. and then and then ended up leaving at 4 a.m. to go to the mountain. I went to Quandary. That was my second 14er.
You just had an hour's sleep.
Yeah, an hour's sleep, and also hungover, so wasn't great.
Also hungover. That's impressive.
No, that is a feat.
So it
Tossing
was a
cookies
choice.
at 14,000 feet.
I don't know what came over me. I was I have to do this, and I originally was gonna go with friends, but they backed out, so I was no, I'm still doing it.
That'll happen.
And then I couldn't find the trailhead at first. Started freaking out about that. I'm I made it all the way here and I can't even find the trailhead.
Did you research it ahead of time, or did you kind of just type it in your
really
maps?
was going in blind, which is not this is not how you should do it.
That's why they're listening to this podcast. The do nots.
This is the do's and do nots. But luckily, this is what you do if you need to be with or if you feel you're not, you're getting lost or anything. Find someone, because I ended up actually hiking with this person that I met on the trail, so we ended up pacing and staying next to each other nearly the same the entire time, so I wasn't completely solo, and honestly I don't think I could have done it just by myself. I probably could have, but it's good to have other people there that are around you. And Quandary is a very populated trail too, so
yeah, Quandary, I would say if you are going to do a solo hike, that's the one to do, because after sunrise, you'll likely see somebody. If, God forbid, you were to get hurt, there'd be somebody along the trail within 5-10 minutes who would see you and be able to kind of come up with something to rescue you. But solo hiking, definitely prepare. Don't go into it as blindly, because I've done...
Have you done a solo 14?
I've done a few solo, and Honestly, they're some of the most humbling experiences I've ever had, but you have to go into it prepared.
What was one of the biggest worries while you were doing it solo?
So I did Mount Yale this past summer. I drove out at like 8-9 p.m. out to the trailhead, slept at the trailhead, which not all 14ers allow you to do that, but this one did.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like camp in tents.
Exactly.
In
Yeah.
the
So I just kind of car camped, or people tent camp. Yeah.
Okay.
And woke up at 3 a.m. and started hiking. So I was one person alone hiking a 14er before sunrise and got to the peak just pretty much there at sunrise. So that entire time, 2-3 hours in the forest alone in the dark, it was a lot. And the things that went through my mind would be like, what if there's a bear? What if there's, always bring your bear spray.
I'm terrified of bears. It's one of my biggest fears out in the woods. Always have my bear spray just on my hip, ready to go, just like a holster. Good to go.
It's not like my biggest fear in the world, but I mean, I'm alone. So
everything else doesn't scare me. If I just died falling off the 14er or died of, didn't bring enough water, fine. But a bear, oh no.
Really? I didn't even think about that when I went on my 14er. I was like, no.
You never know.
No.
Sorry, I just cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's totally okay. But, I mean, that didn't faze me too much. I just I have my headlamp on. Don't be fazed by it. Just go. It's a trudge. So 3 a.m. got to the peak by 6 or so, and I had the entire peak to myself for an hour before any other sign of life and humans were there. So
was that sunrise?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely on my bucket list, doing a 14er sunrise. That must be amazing.
And once you do a sunrise 14er,
especially solo, that would just be like so.
You can't go back to just going during midday.
Yeah. How many sunrise summits have you done?
Ooh. I didn't do many. Actually, my first sunrise was Mount Yale. And then I've probably done 5 sunrise. 5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah, because I know one of the Mountain Kids hiking meetups you came on, it was like a sunset hike and turkey trot trail. And then you...
Hey, we're at a Mountain Kids meetup. Please join us next time.
Said, I got to go drive in 4 hours to do a sunrise 14er the next day. We're like, wow, this kid is just...
That is accurate.
This kid is crazy outdoors guy right here. Yeah. That was the first time we met Matt. He came to a meetup, and then the next morning he's like, yep,
you kind
sunrise.
of inspired me.
Really?
Yeah.
They've actually met on that one. That was the one time
Yeah,
they
that
met.
was the one we met on. And I was like, I should
Just
do that.
crazy coincidence.
So
and now we're talking
able
about 14ers.
Yeah.
That's fun.
No, that's great. I'm happy I inspired you, because I think it's important for people to kind of find these passions, and I found mine. And everybody asks, like, are you gonna complete all of them? I hope so, but I mean, life kind of gets in the way. If I need like internships or anything, like I likely will finish them, I hope, but if something gets in the way that keeps me from doing them, I am very happy with how many I've done so far, and I think that's what people have to keep in mind. You should be incredibly happy with doing 2. And if you want to stop there, you can, but if you want to do more, you can. It's not up to anybody else.
Yeah. So you said you've summited 19. Why do people say it like that? It's almost like there's like an asterisk just for like the newbies, because I know a lot of people are like, what is this? Like, I summited 19. They like emphasize that.
Well, that kind of speaks to my most recent one, Mount of the Holy Cross. I did that around November. It was a little bit later in the season for sure. It was a little snowy up near the peak, and little did I know the person I was going with, or one of the people in the group, that was her first 14er. And it's a class 2 in the snow, first time, so that was kind of on me and on her for kind of not talking about it, because she started getting altitude sickness and kind of exhausted, and it was just bright out and no sunscreen, lack of water. It was just kind of, it seemed unplanned. kind of the way we went about things.
It's just kind of getting sketchy.
Yeah,
it was getting bad vibes.
Very bad vibes. I had a fishy feeling in my stomach. And so we ended up turning around 3/4 up the peak. So we did not summit, but I have attempted 20 and I've summited 19. So it's just when you get to the physical peak, the physical summit of the mountain you're climbing.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that's also a good point, is always listen to your gut and
Always listen
know
to
your
your
limits. And, there's always next time. You don't want to risk it. You can try it again.
There's always next time. Don't get stuck on a peak, please. Don't get stuck in the weather, please.
That's another good point, is the weather. Isn't that a big part of 14ers and having to plan, and sometimes you can't even go due to the weather? Like, what's the game plan for weather planning and just the whole weather aspect?
Yeah, I have canceled plenty of 14ers due to weather concerns. I don't know. How was the weather on Quandary and Bierstadt?
So Bierstadt was fine. We hiked earlier for Bierstadt because storms in Colorado roll in around noon, 1 to 2 p.m.-ish.
Is that the general rule? Is
in the summer usually?
During the summer months, yes.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb is to get off by noon.
Yeah, so we got to the top, summited around maybe 11, and then a group wanted to go and do Sawtooth to Evans. But I ended up not joining them because there was a storm rolling in. And I was this is my first 14er.
A lot of people get struck by lightning, right? Like, that's a big concern. And
more than you would want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being at 14,000 feet in a storm of any kind.
I was already struck by lightning once. I don't need to do that again.
Really? Yeah. Was that on a mountain?
No, in my house.
Okay.
You got struck in your house.
Yeah, our house got struck and then it caught on fire, so it was a whole thing.
Wow, let's hope that's not a bad omen.
So I was like, that's why I really don't mess with that.
Or you're good. Like, go up in any storm. You've already had your lightning for your lifetime.
Yeah.
Do not mess with
the chances
Mother
a second
Nature.
time, I know someone that's been struck 3 times, so.
Well, you're right.
You should definitely be off by noon still.
Yeah. And then Quandary was just snowy. But it was, I think when I was hiking up there, everyone was saying that this was the nicest 14er that they'd ever hiked because it was such great weather other than the snow at the top.
Absolutely.
And you said it was snowy. Let's talk about that. Did you have any special gear for the snow, or were you just winging it?
Once again, this whole Quandary experience was very winging it, and now I know what not to do. So I didn't have any spikes or proper shoes, or my outfit was fine. I didn't feel too cold, but I just wish I had better shoes.
Yeah, I would always recommend just carrying spikes for any hike in the winter in the mountains. You'll probably always need them.
Oddly enough, I didn't get spikes until my last 14er I attempted. Right. Yeah, and it helped a lot. So I recommend them. Just get little micro spikes from REI or Walmart. Anything works because you're going to destroy them anyway.
I hiked 2,000 elevation gain straight up a mountain, just sheet ice on the trail. Oh. And it was just flat basketball shoes. And I basically surfed down on the ice and just crab walked. It was a sight to see. I think I have some videos. I'll probably put it up here. There you go. I'm putting it on the video right now. Sorry, audio version. All right. So next issue is water. How much water should you bring? How much should a newbie tend to think, or length of 14er to how many liters, milliliters, ounces?
I bring about the same for any length 14er, and I haven't kind of maxed it out yet. But I usually bring 2 Nalgene water bottles, which hold 1 liter each. So I bring 2 liters, which for some people might be too much. But I drink a lot of water, and I like to think, if I were to get stuck or have to stay on the mountain for longer than I plan to, I have the water that is necessary for that. But I have a pretty big backpack, bigger than what most people are likely going to bring, a little day pack or something. Most of that is my camera gear. That is one big thing. So I'm carrying a lot more than what most people would like to and what most people do. But I definitely recommend bringing everything you need, or everything you could need, because you might not need all of it, but if something happens or if weather rolls in, you'll definitely be thankful to have that extra gear. What about you?
I usually bring about a liter.
A liter?
Like, yeah. Or I have like one of those Camelback, like the backpack things that you wear. Like I've used that before.
And
It's
how
nice.
long was Mount Bierstadt and Quandary?
How many hours?
In terms of like
Or-
mileage and hours completed.
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. I know, I don't even know how many miles, but we started around like probably 4 hiking a.m.
Okay.
and then we got down by like noon latest,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah.
That could be, I can't.
No, yeah. I think the last time I remember, Quandary is like 6 miles. So I think for something like that, 1 liter would be fine for me. But again, I always bring 2 liters anyway. The longest 14er I've done so far is Pikes Peak. Did not do the bar trail because that's 26 miles out and back. I did the Crags Trail on the backside of Pikes Peak, which was around 15, 16 miles. And that one, I was calling it close.
That is a healthy trek.
With my water, yeah.
Okay.
Your feet will hurt.
Yeah. What about snacks? What type of snackage do you bring?
Bring calorie dense, high nutritional value, and honestly, actually not that high in nutritional value. Just bring sugary stuff that'll keep you going.
What are your favorites?
My go-to is a banana placed in a tortilla with peanut butter holding it together, and then I bring a Ziploc baggie full of dried mangoes from Costco. Just something like that, high in sugar. You'll be thanking it whenever you're hiking up 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. It's definitely helpful.
I probably eat at least like 3 or 4 Cliff Bars.
You're a Cliff Bar girl?
Yeah, I
Cliff
love
Bar
Cliff
sponsor
Bars.
us.
Protein with you.
Bars.
That'll help a lot.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big honey roasted peanuts guy. And I just hit the spot for some reason. It's a little sweet, but you also get, healthy-ish nuts.
Exactly. And I recommend just, I don't know, bring your favorite snack. Bring something to enjoy on the peak.
Yeah. I always bring some electrolytes too, just in case, powders or...
Yeah, and I always, I drink maybe half an Algene, so 500 milliliters of some sort of electrolyte powder, or I drink a Gatorade or something like that. But definitely bring like your favorite snack. Have it on the peak. Don't litter though. Please pack it out. Pack it out.
I typically bring extras of snacks and electrolytes and water just in case other people, are struggling and need it. Because I did have to rescue someone with my dad before in Arizona, where he was like 85 and it was like 95 degrees out. He was hiking for his birthday. He said he did it every year for his birthday. But it was so hot and he heat exhaustion, and we gave him some Powerade and put wet washcloths on him, and gave him some shade. But yeah, we helped carry him down, and so I always bring extra stuff just because of that. I'm like, wow, it can happen. It's happened to me, and I would want help if it was me on the mountain. So I always bring extras for sure.
I also feel like on a mountain you get so much hungrier, so much faster, because you're burning so many calories hiking, and then also the elevation. I'm actually starving after every break. I'm like, okay, time for another Cliff Bar.
Also, I would say put something in the car. Bring some sandwiches, or get a cooler and put some electrolyte drinks in the back of your car. Because when you come back down, you will want nothing more than an ice cold Gatorade, water. Really, anything you guys enjoy, I would say keep it in your car.
Also, it makes you feel safer if you're up on the mountain and I'm like, oh, I'm running low. It's like, all right, if I get back, I have a gallon of water waiting for me. So it's kind of like calms you down mentally if you are like, it's a hot day, you're running low on water, you're like, oh crap, I'm in trouble, no one's around. It kind of just makes you like, all right, I just need to get back to the car and I'm good. So I always have extra stuff.
Definitely always be prepared.
Always be prepared. It's basically the lesson here.
Yeah. My motivation though, after a hike though, that extreme, I'm like, ooh, a burger sounds so good right now. That is like the number one reason why I finish those hikes, is to
And
Yeah.
you meet people. I have met so many cool people on 14ers, specifically if I'm hiking solo or even with friends. And we end up meeting at the closest town and having a coffee or having a burger, having pizza, stopping Bojo's in Idaho Springs, get some mountain style pizza. That's always a plus. So yeah, there's lots of things you can do to kind of keep your mind sane while you're hiking a 14er and peace of mind that Jeff was talking about.
Before we do the Q&A portion from our questions from our Instagram followers, what are, to just kind of wrap it up where people can start, what are the top 3 suggestions for beginner 14ers, and what time should they start them, and what should they expect?
Alright, so for the 3 biggest things I would say y'all should do to prepare or just kind of to be ready for a 14er is to always follow your gut. I think that's the biggest one. If something doesn't feel right, it's not worth it. Not worth your life, not worth anybody else's life. So definitely turning around is not the end of the day. There's always another peak to summit. Second one would be always be prepared, classic, but bring a backpack that can hold everything you might need, every layer you might need, even if you don't use it. It does suck having to carry all that weight, but you'll be thankful if you ever need it. And then the third one, I would say, pretty simple. Just have fun. It's not something that should be too heavy on your chest. It is simply climbing a 14er. It is something that should be enjoyable and rewarding, but if you kind of push yourself too hard, it's not enjoyable, and you'll regret it later on if something bad happens. So, yeah.
And the top 3 suggestions for beginners to start on the mountains.
Top 3 suggestions for starter mountains. I started on Grays and Torreys, and that's what most people usually like to say as a rule of thumb for the first 2, or first if you just want to do Grays or Torreys. But based on my experience, I would say honestly Bierstadt or Quandary. It's easier to get to in terms of the roads, as well as Bierstadt, really mellow trail, not too far away from the parking lot. It's like 5 miles out and back. I think it's the shortest one. And there's a lot of beauty to be seen around there as well. So,
how far from Denver are they?
Bierstadt
Roughly.
is right outside of Georgetown, up Guanella Pass. So Grays and Torreys are about an hour and a half. Bierstadt might be like 2 hours from the Denver area. Okay. Yeah.
And what time in the morning do you think people should start to be off by noon, typically, for those ones?
I would say be at the trailhead, be in the parking lot at the trailhead at around 5:30 or 6 a.m., which is pretty early, but it just kind of, you beat the traffic, you beat the crowds, as well as you beat the storms later in the day, which I think is the most important part. Earlier in the season, you don't have to worry too much about the storm issues, but if you're hiking in the middle of the summer, I would say start around 5:30 or 6, depending on how long the hike is.
That takes me to another point people always wonder about. What is considered 14er season? Because typically people don't hike them in the winter. I know there's some that you can.
Depends how brave you are.
Yeah.
What's the typical average Joe season you'd recommend? Between what months?
I guess I haven't done any winter 14ers, but general rule from mid to late June is the start, and then ending around mid to late September. But obviously you can go beyond September like I did in November, but you might get some snow, and you can go before like around May, but you might get some snow kind of post-holing. Lots of stuff going on there.
Typically in September is when you start to see snowfall on the peaks.
Yeah.
Gets a little slippery. Now let's get into the question and answer portion. So on our Instagram, MTNKDS, at MTNKDS, we put out a poll for people to ask their questions on 14ers. Any and all questions, we're welcome. So we'll just go ahead and go through some of the most popular ones. We did cover a lot of these in our podcast so far, but overall, a lot of people had questions about winter hiking. And specifically, they were like, what's the best gear? Or for getting to the top, they always get cold and they want to know what type of jackets. So just for hiking in general, you said you didn't do any 14ers in the winter. I think you did one in the snow. But for just hiking in general in the winter, what would you recommend for gear, jackets, shoes, just anything like that?
For me, honestly, most of the time, if I'm in snow, it's been well traveled and packed down. So the number one piece of gear is micro spikes. No need for snowshoes unless you are going backcountry and breaking trail and having this fresh powder. But if you're just hiking on a well traveled trail, you shouldn't have any problems with hiking if you have some micro spikes or something like that. And rule of thumb, always have the 3-layer rule. So always have 3 layers. Something kind of thin, breathable on the bottom layer, maybe a puffy insulating layer, and then a shell on the outside for heavy winds up at the peak.
The wind will get you. You want the shell for sure.
Whether you want it or not.
That's what really makes you cold is when the wind hits.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Oh, well, I mean, I moved in the summer, so I haven't had a lot of experience with, like, winter hiking, but, I mean, on Quandary with, like, even as little snow as there was, I wish I had spikes, so I'm going to second that.
Definitely.
And then also really good gloves because my fingers always get super cold. Yeah. So that's like my number one thing. But
I always bring gloves and then a beanie. Because
And
when
a
you're in
beanie,
the summer, you don't always think about having a hat. But my ears get so cold and have bad circulation that a beanie, I have
everything you might need.
2 in the car at all times.
I actually wear like one of those like North Face headbands and then a beanie on top of that because my ears are so sensitive.
Yeah, because it gets cold once you start getting up there. And if the wind hits, it just pierces you.
Now, I haven't done a winter 14er, but on a lot of reviews I have seen on All Trails, and just like YouTube and different Instagram stories that I've seen have said Quandary is a very good, accessible 14er to do during the winter. So if you are looking for a 14er to do, don't do it your first, but if you want to do a 14er during the winter, I would suggest Quandary or Bierstadt. I've heard both of those are very accessible and easy to get to in the winter.
Okay. And so the next question, or a lot of requests we had on our Instagram poll, was any and all tips for solo hiking. I can start it off. So my number one, if you're solo hiking and you're just in the backwoods, backcountry, and you don't really have service, is a GPS. That is what I would say. Number one, safety first, have someone be able to communicate with and be able to get out of a sticky situation if you get hurt. That'd be my number one.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, my number one is tell people that you're going on this hike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the more people you tell, the more accountable you are to finish it. But also, like I always tell my parents if I'm going on a hike so that they know that I'm going to be gone in the mountains. And if they don't hear from me when I'm down, then like something could have happened.
Yeah, exactly. I usually try to tell my parents when I'm down in Castle Rock at their house, or I tell my friends like, hey, I'm going to be leaving at this time. Hopefully I'll be by the peak by this time. I will be back by this time. If I'm not any of those things, I will let you know. If I can't let you know, like if I don't show up at the time that I said, please, like, I don't call somebody. Yeah, I might be in a sticky situation. So definitely let people know. That's a big one. And what's really good, it doesn't let you communicate with people, but on All Trails, the app, I have the Pro membership, which is, I believe, $30 for the year, which the amount of hikes I do is definitely worth it. You can actually download the map. So if you go off trail, it'll let you know. If you go out of service, you'll still have the map there. It will still be tracking your calories, where you are on the map, and how much further you have to go. So I definitely suggest investing into that, even though it's not too much of a commitment, but definitely worth it.
Yeah, being able to download the maps is important because I've used All Trails before, and if you go out of service, it stops
screwed,
working.
Yeah,
And that's also
I've
why
had
I
that
got a
happen
GPS. I'm like, safety, GPS, awesome, and then it'll work all the time, which is cool. And then also, I always have my dad as my contact in it, so when I get to a trailhead, I'll just send a text, and then it'll actually send him my location and coordinates, which is pretty cool, so he knows where I'm hiking. And then I just let him know when I get back down, of course. But if I ever needed to, they could see my direct location. So GPS, I'd recommend. Any
Another
other
thing to
solo
kind of
hiking
say about that
tips?
sole hiking
Definitely
is
bear spray.
Yeah,
Works
bear
on
spray.
not only bears, but humans as well.
It does work.
Works
on
on
humans.
creeps very well.
True.
Most people
They
don't
might
think
not
about that.
like it
It's
too
like 10
much,
times the
but,
power of pepper spray, right?
Yeah.
It covers way more
Just
area.
make sure the wind is not blowing towards you when
Yes.
you spray.
Oh, you wanna? Yeah, don't spray it into the wind. Hopefully, you never have to spray it.
Oh yeah, that's also true.
It's there if you need it. So that'd be a good one.
Yeah, I would say for solo hiking, don't go out of your comfort zone. If you have something in front of you that you have to climb and you're not comfortable with it, it is not a time to try it on your own. Because, if something happened, you are alone. And a lot of times on those more less traveled 14ers, I've done only a few of those, but I will be delving more into those this next coming summer. You definitely don't see as many people on the trail. It might be 30, 40 to an hour before somebody comes in contact with you. So I would definitely suggest, if you can, hike with a buddy, even if it's just one other person. If you can't, remember all these rules that we have kind of spoke to in the last few minutes.
All right, and then the next, we'll say this is the last question. What is the best time of year to hike a 14er? Like, when's it going to be the most comfortable, your best bet? What time of year?
Depends. I don't know. I did that one back in November, and that was great if we didn't have issues with altitude sickness. I would say the most comfortable 14er peaks I have summited have been early fall, because then you do not have to worry about weather as much, especially if you start early. You can stay on the peak until 2, 3, 4 p.m., but during the summer is definitely when most people will be doing it, but you do have to watch out for those storms.
Okay, so early fall is a good time to go.
Yeah, and even at the base, it can fluctuate from 85 at the base of the mountain up to the peak when I did Grays and Torreys, and that was 30 degrees on the peak. So doing it in the fall, it kind of narrows that margin a bit. So you can start at maybe 60, 70 degrees and then go up to the peak and it's like 50 or 40. So it's just not as drastic of a change.
Okay, awesome.
So it's very comfortable.
Well, I think we answered a lot of information questions on all things 14ers. Hopefully the beginners listening in got something useful out of that. Hopefully the people that have done 14ers might have learned something too or just enjoyed the conversation. Big thanks to Matt and Laura for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
It was a good time. You were great guests for podcast number 2, our first guest ever. And I'm sure we will do some excursions in the near future and plan some fun stuff.
Count me in.
Awesome.